Okay, argument 3, but black people own slaves, which is valid. We're talking about, in this case, they're referencing Anthony Johnson, otherwise known as Antonio. And we're at the Black Perspectives website. And Anthony Johnson, or Antonio, was actually brought in as a slave himself, but it doesn't negate or detract or deflect from the fact that the majority of slaves were black indeed, and we're going to get into that. So the fact that some black people were enslaved does not, again, negate that most enslaved people in the United States were black and held against their will. Slavery was a system of oppression, exploitation, primarily designed to benefit other races of people, white people, Jewish people, and intercontinentally as well. You know, it was trades, it was goods, services, all types of wealth that was created. And understand that during that time, the purchasing power of the dollar was very much stronger. So those people who acquired assets, and this is what I want people who are detractors or people who don't use their logical part of their brain yet, hasn't evolved quite yet. Detractors have to understand that during that time, the dollar could purchase much more than it can today. So back then, you could acquire more assets than you can today with those dollars. So that's why it's so important that you want to know why reparations make sense, is because during that time, that was the only time period that you could acquire a substantial amount of assets, especially knowing that back then you didn't have to pay for labor like people pay now for labor. Okay, and even the labor that they pay for today is only a very, very small fraction of what is actually due and owed. Okay, so this is why those estimates adjusted for inflation that I mentioned earlier make sense. You know, and 33 billion does sound like way too much or whatever else that people come up into people's heads. But now, when you really get to really delve deep into this and understand this at a deeper level, you understand inflation adjusted dollars payments make sense. Okay. And of course, it is also essential to consider the context in which some people enslaved people. In some cases, people may have purchased family members or loved ones to protect them from being sold to cruel or abusive enslavers. While this does not justify the ownership of human beings, it highlights how slavery disrupted and destroyed families and communities. Okay, so again, of course, this highlights the lynchings that were in the South, but of course, it expanded. This is the number that they came up with, which is I think around 6,000. I'm gonna go ahead and say it was probably 3 times that amount, if not more, of lynchings. You think about all the people that were dumped in the Mississippi. Okay, if that ever was drained out, what would be found down there, right? How many would be found down there? The full scope and scale and actual numbers would probably be mind-boggling. Okay, and that's from the Equal Justice Initiative in 2020. Now, counter argument 3, finally, it is worth noting that the fact that some black people enslaved did not excuse or justify the centuries of violence, exploitation, discrimination that black people have faced in the United States after slavery. Slavery was a fundamental part of systemic racism, oppression that has shaped the country's history and continues to impact black communities today. Focusing on the actions of a few individuals does not address or challenge the more significant structural issues that perpetrate inequality and injustice. So we're looking at the 1830 Census Bureau. We have total slaves, 2,009,050. So out of those total slaves, how many free colored people? There were 319,000, not 576. So let's say we take 12,000 enslaved people out of that percentage. That's about 0.63%. So again, the logic behind this illogical argument does not consider all of the other enslaved population. And so it again, one black person that people reference, right? One specific person. And of course that negates all of the other people who went through the oppression. You know what I'm saying? These are the arguments that and you can tell like these people, again, they just basic math. Of course there was not everybody was a slave owner. Right. So that's the thing that people have to understand. Your family may have not been in a lineage of slave owners. That's true. And so they say, okay, well, why do I need to pay for it? Right. So your family may not have been a lineage of slave owners, but you reap the benefits that the enslaved produced, either directly or indirectly. Okay. And we know that a lot of slave owners had to be Masons during that time to be a slave owner. So again, I'm sure there was hidden handshakes and all types of stuff that they did to benefit. So the next argument for the next video is going to be, but the country will go broke. We can't afford it. What are we going to do? Says Dr. Phil. What are we going to do? What are we, stupid? I don't know how we're going to pay it.
Hell, you smell the sofa. I do not get tired, they retired on the sofa. Team of League of Sires and we flying under no one. Going overtime, I'm overpowered, it's over. I be writing fire, hot as hell, you smell the sofa. I do not get tired, they retired on the sofa. Team of League of Sires and we flying under